Hello everyone, my name's Vicky and I work for the Education People. Thanks for attending this webinar today as part of the Apprentice Ken event. We're really lucky to have Ian, Vicky and Sophia from Profile Development and Training tonight. So just wanted to let you know, if you do have any questions during the session, please pop them in the question box and we will answer them at the end for you. So I'll hand over to Ian, but thanks very much for your time tonight, guys.
Brilliant, thank you, Vicky. Good evening and welcome, and thanks a lot for attending. I'm Ian Pearce, the Business Development Manager and Project Manager for Profile Development and Training. We'll be covering a range of topics about apprenticeships in our short presentation, but hopefully we'll be answering some of the questions that maybe some of you posed in the initial session with Vicky, and some examples of that as well. You'll hear a bit from me, and then probably who you really want to hear from is an ex-apprentice, and she's also a long-term member of staff of ours now, Vicky. And she'll actually be talking a little bit about, I know some of you may be asked about what do you do if you miss the grades, and when she got the job with us, we were looking for a certain level of maths and English that Vicky didn't have, but she'll explain how she got around that and how she still got a job with us. And then we'll be moving on to our current new office apprentice, Sophia. Similarly, you asked some questions earlier on about what level of apprenticeship should I start at. Sophia, she'll let you know more, but Sophia did A-levels, level 3, but she started on a level 3 apprenticeship with us in business administration, because business administration is not one of the topics she covered in school, so she's starting again at level 3 on that one. Sophia only started with us last week, but in a safe way, and she'll explain a little bit more about that a little bit later. As Vicky said, there's an opportunity to ask questions at the end, but please do feel free to interrupt during the presentation, and Vicky or Sam will let us know if we need to answer that one there and then. The next slide, please, Vicky. Yeah, we're a small Ofsted good rated, something we're very proud of, work-based and e-learning training provider based in Thanet. We have a 96% positive learner satisfaction rating, something we're very, very proud of. The learner journey is at the centre of all our decision making at Profile. We mostly operate in Kent and South East London, but we do also deliver on a national level for our adult education training. And our adult education training is similarly close to our hearts, and we deliver training in subjects around understanding autism and children's mental health and similar topics. We specialise in the training of people of all ages that wish to work in the education or childcare sectors predominantly, or the upskilling of those that are already working in those sectors and need to get the qualifications for job security, employability and things like that. We do this predominantly via apprenticeships, but we also have student loans funded courses and some adult education budget funding as well. We pride ourselves on the fact that every learner has a slightly different experience with us. Every programme, whether it be an apprenticeship or a loans funded course, is designed around the learner need and the learner preference. So the apprenticeships, for instance, can be very face-to-face in the workplace. Obviously, things have changed more recently, or they can be very much paper-based, or they can be e-learning, or there can be a combination of all of those in a sort of blended approach. More recently, for reasons beyond our control, obviously, a lot of our apprenticeship work has been remote teaching and e-learning. But to be honest with you, we'll be doing e-learning and remote work to an extent for about 4 years now in better times, and we are pretty much experts in those areas. We predominantly work in schools and childcare providers across Kent, delivering apprenticeships in the workplace for teaching assistants and early years staff. I know someone earlier on mentioned about teaching assistants. And in fact, we hold the contract with Kent County Council for the delivery of the teaching assistant apprenticeship to all schools across Kent that are under their wing. The teaching assistant, I think we've all come across a teaching assistant at some stage at school. It takes about 16 months to complete. I know Vicky mentioned earlier on the minimum length of apprenticeship is a year, but as you can imagine, your role within a school will be term time only. You tend to only work 38 or 39 weeks a year, so it takes you that much longer to complete the apprenticeship. It's a similar situation for those who want to work with younger children in the early years sectors. The apprenticeships tend to last between about 18 and 24 months. We do also deliver business administrator apprenticeships. I know there was a question earlier on about office-based apprenticeships, and as well as a training provider, and we offer apprenticeships and training for out there in the community. We also always have our own apprentice who always seems to stick with us, and you hear more about that from Sophia a bit later on. Thankfully, over the recent lockdowns, we've managed to keep all of our apprentices engaged, and this is all of them. We didn't lose one. They were all kept up with their work, all are on track. Yes, it was a lot of remote work and a lot of phone calls and Skype and emailing, but all of them are saying the most important thing was they're all on track with their apprenticeships, they will get their qualifications, and they are all keeping their jobs. Once again, we work in schools and nurseries. They have all been affected by this, the COVID pandemic, to lesser or greater degrees. As you know, some schools are fully open, they're full of key worker kids, some schools are barely open. Similarly with nurseries, but they've all been open to some extent. And no matter what happens in the current climate, we know that schools and nurseries will always be there. So we are actually quite thankful that we work in those industries and that our apprentices have been able to keep earning while they were learning throughout this and currently now. And as you can see, we even took on an apprentice last week. So it is entirely possible, no matter what is going on out there in the world at the moment, as long as we adapt methods in a safe way. We work with schools in the childcare sector, and both of these are growing sectors. There's schools growing all the time. There's more and more kids of certain ages. There's more and more nurseries required. It's a growing sector where you can, in theory, have a job for life if you want to get into it. And entering via the apprenticeship, we find, is possibly the best route. I do a lot of presentations to schools. Headmistresses tell me that they cannot keep traditional teaching assistants and they can't find teaching assistants of good enough caliber quite often, or they'll hang around for a few months and then move on. The apprenticeship route is an ideal way of you finding your footing into a school, learning about what they want from you, and then basically molding and shaping you to what they need for you in the long term. And for that reason, basically 95 apprentices stay on with their apprenticeship employer into permanent employment. We keep in touch with all apprentices for at least 2 years after they leave us, in case they need more training or guidance, or just to keep in touch with them, to be honest with you. Regarding recruitment, things are a little quiet around about this time of the year. There tends to be two main recruitment periods for schools and nurseries, even though we do get dribs and drabs of vacancies, and Vicky, my colleague, will let you know more about that. But they tend to either recruit just before Christmas, and we've just sort of missed out on that phase for sort of January starts, or then again in the spring or summer for September starts. And this September, for instance, we had 900 apprentices starting as teaching assistants all over Kent, in schools, academies, primary and secondary, pupil referral units, specialist schools, everything you can name of. The apprenticeship itself can be moulded and shaped in the content around exactly your job role. So you could be in an SEN role or an EAL role, or even supporting PE, but the apprenticeship can be blended and changed around that. Finding the vacancies, I think Vicky Lawrence has given you some great tips at the beginning of the presentations. Have a look on the .gov, find an apprenticeship website or the Apprenticeship Kent website, especially around the springtime. We do actually collect names of people that want to be made aware of vacancies, and to be honest with you, earlier the better. So, Vicky will explain to you a little bit later, but some of our vacancies get stupid amounts of applications, and so the earlier you can get them in, the better. And yeah, and as I say, our email addresses will be on the slide at the end, and you can jot those down. I believe they'll be accessible to you via the Kent Choices for You portal as well. And it isn't just about, some people were quite happy with staying as a teaching assistant or an early years educator. It fits around their life. The fact that they have the holidays off fits in nicely. But others also want to carry on moving onwards and upwards. We do actually have level 4 progression routes for our teaching assistant and our early years staff for them to become middle management, obviously earning more money, more responsibility. And as I think Vicky Lawrence mentioned earlier on, there are obviously now degree apprenticeships, and we have a route through from our teaching assistant apprenticeship into foundation degrees into the local university, should you wish to become a teacher. So there is a route there that you can take now without doing your traditional A-level routes. That's enough from me, unless there's any questions that Vicky wants to shout at me at the moment. But I'd like to pass over to Vicky Davis, our centre administrator, who came to us via the apprenticeship route 3.5 years ago. And over to Vicky, and the next slide, please.
Good evening. As Ian said, my name's Vicky Davies, and I started with Profile around 3.5 years ago, and I started as an apprentice. I did a level 2 qualification before I came to Profile with a different training provider, and then I was unemployed for a year because I couldn't find a job because of my disability, and it was a little bit harder for me. So I finally went for a different route of what I'd done before, and I started to train with Profile. As Ian said earlier, my application wasn't all of the grades they needed. I didn't have the English grade they required. I was one grade below. But when that happens, it doesn't mean that the employer won't have a look at your application. You just have to put a lot more of yourself in the application and a lot more effort in. So for me, I told them about my previous experiences. I told them about my disability. I told them all of the things I'd overcome and sort of how I'd got to where I was now and where I wanted to be. And obviously it worked. I mean, I'm still here 3.5 years later, and I'm now mentoring our new member of staff, and she's doing a level 3 business administration apprenticeship. When I sort of enrolled with Profile and was an apprentice, they were really, really good with me. I had a disability which required certain adaptations to the role, so they adapted my hours. They also referred me to Access to Work, and Access to Work is a government scheme, and it puts equipment in place to make sure that you're comfortable within your role. So for me, I got a special desk, an adapted chair, an adapted keyboard, and all of this goes through your employer, but your employer doesn't. They may have to put a contribution, but they don't have to pay for it. It is all government funded. So for anybody out there that's nervous about getting a job because of a disability, or they think that they may not be able to cope because of sitting down all day, a lot of employers are adaptable to that. And Access to Work is a really good scheme to sort of suggest to your employer if they don't know about it. Throughout my journey with Profile, as I say, I started as an apprentice. I did that for 18 months. It was slightly longer than what we expected, but I had to do my English grade alongside. But I did it. And then I've gone on to be a full member of staff, and I now deal with the adult education budget, which, as Ian said earlier, that's sort of based nationally, but it depends where we have funding for at the time. And then I also do the recruitment drive for apprenticeships, which is when you apply on the .gov website, it comes through to me if that's where the employers decided to put the training through. So for applications, I read them and then I send them through to the employer. A lot of employers, they do want your C and above. But as I said earlier, if you don't have that particular grade, but you have the experience behind you, it is always worth putting your all into your application. Let them know that you're passionate about the job role. Let them know where you want to go. Always go that a bit and above and beyond if you haven't got the grades. I mean, go above and beyond if you have, because they like to know your personality, but especially if you don't have the grades, but you really want the role, you need to let them know. It's really important as well that you double check your application. You double check that your spelling, your grammar, your punctuation is right. You've answered the questions clearly. You've mentioned in there that all of the key points they put in the job description, you've mentioned as much of that as possible, so that they know that you've read the job description. They know that you know about the role. You know about the employer. They like to know that you've put in the effort and done your research. A lot of that stands in your favour. I mean, I don't have a say in who they employ. I just forward your application if it's good enough. But they do tend to take note of, I always put a little note when I send an email saying this learner seems passionate about a certain area, and they tend to pick up on it because they know that I've read it and taken note, but not only that you've put a lot of effort in. So please bear that in mind when you're applying, because if you don't put the effort in, sometimes it doesn't even get to the employer because I reject it because I don't think it's good enough. So there's no point in getting your hopes up. And it's not because I'm harsh, it is purely because I don't want to waste your time. Also, when you apply on the .gov website, you can generate your application. Some applicants have not changed the application to the specific job role that they're applying for. So you also need to be aware of that and make sure it's definitely personalised to the job that you've just applied for. Sophia, her application, as Ian said, she had really good levels. She had her level 3s, but she didn't have a level 3 in business admin. But her application was strong. It told us what she wanted to learn, and she showed us that she was passionate. She also put in there about her hobbies and interests, so she came across as a person, not just an application form. She said that she was creative, and somewhere along the lines, hopefully in her apprenticeship, she'll get to use her creative side, and she'll sort of still grow in her creativeness as well as her new job role. At the minute, we don't have any current vacancies because, as Ian said, it's quiet this time of year. But hopefully within sort of April time, we start to pick up for the summer. So please bear that in mind. Look at the .gov website, look at our website, which I believe will be on the end slide, because we always update them to the blog. We also have a Facebook page and we always upload them to there. So always keep an eye out, because a lot of them are TAs and early years, but we also do business admin. I think that's it from me. So I'm going to hand you over to Sophia, and she'll tell you a bit more about her journey so far. Next slide, please.
Hello, so I'm the new business administrator for Profile, and probably the reason why I wanted to do an apprenticeship as opposed to going to university, which I did get into, but I just felt like after school it's quite full on with your academics, and just at this point I wanted to be fully trained in a role as opposed to just writing your essays and doing that kind of thing. Obviously there is a certain amount of coursework you have to complete, but yeah, I sort of wanted to have those skills, and especially people are looking for experience. Unfortunately, people want people that are fresh out of school to be experienced, and there aren't many opportunities. So I will people know how hard it is to try and apply for stuff at the moment. But yeah, just sort of in terms of why I chose this apprenticeship in particular, I think we work with educators, and I was saying the other day, we're always going to need educators, people to support them, and they just seem like a really worthwhile cause to be a part of from all the things I'd seen. In terms of my own actual learning, it's been remote so far, obviously because of COVID and everything, but people are willing to help because at the end of the day they want you to do your job well, and they want you to be able to support yourself and feel like you can ask them questions. So in terms of that, everything being remote at the moment, everyone's been supportive and really helpful. So yeah, I can't complain on that side of things. I think one of the main things I have to stress about when you're doing your application, so be honest, obviously, and really allocate a certain amount of it to something you know you can talk in length about, that you care about, and that will hopefully maybe apply to your role. And like apply for something that is a continuation of your GCSEs or your A levels in my case. So yeah, I had done my A levels, so it's a bit not taking a step backwards, but staying at the same level in terms of the type of qualification. But it's a different experience, I think, and I'm finding it to be different from school. So in terms of sort of where I want to go from this, I'm just hoping that this will give me an idea of what I'd like to do, and that anyone else in the same position also gets an idea of what they want to go into. So yeah, I think that covers most of the points. I'll hand you over back to Ian.
Brilliant. And next slide, please, Vicky, if you can. And it's just questions now. If there's any questions out there.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. That was really interesting. A question for Sophia, if that's all right. How are you finding your apprenticeship, and what do you think are the benefits of doing an apprenticeship?
You're muted. You're muted.
The benefits of being an apprentice, I just think in this time, in this current climate, as much experience you can get to get it as much as possible, whether that's through volunteering, which I would have gone into had I not got this position, definitely, because as I said before, people are looking for young people who are experienced, but obviously there aren't as many opportunities. So definitely why I would advise you an apprenticeship is so that you're fully trained in a role and you've got that experience. No one can take that away from you. Even if you leave afterwards, you've still always got it. So that's why I'd advise it in terms of experience. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
That's great, thank you. Another question is what sort of extracurricular stuff could young people do to help with their applications? I don't know if Vicky or Ian, you want to answer this?
I think it's always, I mean, it's not, so I think it's maybe about identifying transferable skills, which has always been a bit of a passion of mine. I think we quite often see applications where people have just said, I've only worked at McDonald's, or I only did a week at, I don't know, McDonald's in year 10. There's skills you can get out of everything in life, you know, even if maybe you don't get a chance to get out and do work experience, you're looking after your little brothers and sisters all the time, you know, there's responsibility, you know, there's timekeeping, there's all sorts of skills that you can sap out of normal life and activities in life, that you can actually then look at the job description and think, actually, I do that. I might not have done that job before, but you know, I am responsible. You know, I have been in charge. I have been, you know, in charge of a team, or I have done this, that, and the other. So anything you can do to try and, because as Sophia says, getting the actual experience other than the couple of weeks you're offered in year 10 and maybe sometimes in year 13 if you're doing certain A levels, you know, really doesn't necessarily prepare you for the working world. And so yeah, or give the employer enough information. So it's about thinking outside the box, and it's really hard for us, and I know it is, to actually sell yourself, and it's not really doesn't feel natural for us, I don't think. You know, we're not those sorts of people, but it is like you say, and to an extent, Vicky's sort of application really was almost like a heart on a sleeve application, and then Sophia's application really was that let's find out more about you, because quite often, as Vicky said, the applications come to us looking quite samey. And you know, but then suddenly you see there's always a section on there for some additional questions, and the employer tends to ask a curveball question like, you know, or something about what you want to do in the future, or something. They like to know what you like to do at the weekends. I was like, Sophia, you know, she wrote a lot about her creative side, which is not necessarily directly linked into administration, but we see that as something we can tap into as an employer, for helping us develop our marketing materials, our website, sort of things that we're not so good to yourself. So don't be shy of talking about skills that you don't think are 100% relevant to the job initially, because people, small employers like us, we all tend to wear many hats. We're only a team of 15, and yes, we all have a defined job role, but we also all step into each other's shoes when we're off sick. And very much schools are like that as well, that everyone mucks in when especially at the moment, as you can imagine what's going on with schools, it's a case of everyone mucking in and just making the best of a bad situation. So if you could identify that to us, and as Vicky said, overcoming some barriers, and that barrier can be a personal incident in your life, can be something horrible, you know, please do talk about those things. Don't think, oh, we can't talk about them. Quite often we find that kids that have been in care don't want to talk about being in care. Personally, and we see someone who's having been in care is quite likely to have experienced far many things in their life, and is probably going to be that much more mature and that much a better worker for employers. And also there's grants available for them as well to help them along the line. So as Sophia said, please just try and be as honest as possible, because honesty is always the best policy, especially around grades, because we do have to see copies of certificates and things like that. And what Vicky did was missed a grade, yeah, so she didn't score so highly in that section, but then she scored really highly in dedication, motivation, research of the company, willingness to do the job, examples of her improving her own learning and performance, things like that really, examples of her helping out other people. As Sophia said, volunteering, that appears great when you're giving your own time for someone else. And quite a lot of our apprentices actually have actually at some stage volunteered in the school they've been in before, even in year 10, and they're remembered, you know, and you approach that school again later on. And we do recommend actually just sometimes just approaching employers if you want to get an apprenticeship with them, because there is actually a big incentive in for employers at the moment. And because of at the moment, an employer will get somewhere between £1,000 and £3,000 for taking on an apprentice, depending on the age and depending on when they take them on. So there are incentives for them as well. So it's always worth just banging on the door, You know, we've many apprentices we've started delivering training to because they've knocked on or written a letters to the headmistress, and you know, or just apply the traditional route like through the .gov websites. But the more information you can give us, the better. Is definitely what I would say. Any more questions, Vicky?
Yep. Just if you've got any advice for anyone that maybe wants to do an apprenticeship but isn't sure what sort of apprenticeship they want to go into.
That might be better for maybe Sophia or Vicky, that one. I know, Vicky, you've tried your hand at a couple of different routes, haven't you?
I did a customer service apprenticeship with Age Concern. It was a day centre for the elderly. And I'll be completely honest, I absolutely loved it. And I volunteered for just over a year beforehand. And that's how I got my apprenticeship there in the first place, because I worked hard and they didn't want me to leave. Due to my disability, I couldn't quite do all of the things they required, like the bathing. And that's why I took a change in route. Taking a change in route isn't always the easiest thing, because I never knew that I didn't imagine myself to be where I am now. But I would say the best thing to do if you're unsure, don't directly go for an apprenticeship just yet. Go and volunteer for example, for a customer service sort of place, like a shop or anything like that, or go and volunteer for an office. They will always take you on just for a week of experience, and it will just give you that little bit of an edge, one, on your application, and two, it will give you that bit of, or maybe I do want to do this, or this isn't for me. It really does depend on the individual. Also, if you're not up for volunteering or anything like that, read the job description on the apprenticeship. If it suits your personality and it suits maybe something you've covered in school. So I did business studies in school, so actually I should have really gone for a business study, sort of a business admin apprenticeship, knowing that I actually quite enjoy business studies. But I would always say, sort of, make sure you read it and see if it matches your personality, because you may not be the person to sit there with a bunch of screaming 3-year-olds, or you may not be the person to stand there and answer the phone to sort of 200 people that decide they want to ask silly questions, or sit behind a desk. It really does just depend on you, but either volunteering or making sure the application matches, or the job description matches your personality and what you want.
Definitely. And Sophia, your A-levels were very different from what you've ended up doing, aren't they, now?
Yeah, I think A-levels themselves are very stressful if anyone else has done them, and I think it's hard to give you an idea of what job you want to do just from GCSEs or A-levels. So I think, as Vicky said before, definitely trying as much as you can, and as Ian said as well, sort of going after something if you know you want it, in terms of just you've seen a shop you like and you want to have some work experience there, or just anything like that, and then it will hopefully narrow things down with any luck. So, yeah.
Thank you.
That's excellent. That is all the questions we have. So I'm just gonna run your next slide so you can have your contact details up. But before you guys wrap up, I just wanted to say a big thank you to you, and it's absolutely fantastic to hear your actual experiences. I think that's always really, really impactful and really helpful to hear from people that have been through the experience. So thank you for sharing that, Vicky and Sophia. But I'll leave it to you guys to wrap up.
Fantastic. No, just once again, thanks very much for listening. The contact details for all of us are there, or just Google Profile Development and Training or Profile DT in Facebook. But yeah, Vicky Lodge, am I right in thinking these details will be accessible via the, would I be able to pick up these slides via the Kent Choices for You website, or?
Yeah, so all of this
Yeah.
will be available. The recorded version of this session, along with your website, will be available on the website that everyone used to access this event.
Fantastic. And we're always welcome for questions. We get it a lot, and from parents as well. Yeah, and I noticed earlier on there were some sort of questions possibly from parents about financial considerations, and they do have to be taken in. People do lose child benefit. Obviously, it is employment. but ultimately it's employment with an end. You know, that the apprenticeship's got a bit of a bad name. A few years ago, I think there was a lot of employers maybe taking on an apprentice and then saying goodbye at the end when they finish, and then taking on another apprentice. But things like Ofsted and other authorities like that, it means that sort of stuff can't go on anymore. Employers have to have a genuine vacancy for a genuine job role for you for when you finish your apprenticeship. So it's just another thing, and it is swallowing. And Vicky and Sophia agree to this. It is harder. I mean, we don't pay the minimum, but there are a lot of schools do pay the apprentice minimum wage. It is hard to survive like that, but it is a means to an end. And you know, within sort of 14 to 18 months, you are level 3 qualified, and then you will automatically go into more wages, and then keep on pushing for promotion like Vicky's done. Vicky started doing a bit of everything now. She's a specialist in her area, and yeah, just keep on pushing away. And I know there aren't huge amounts of vacancies out there at the moment, and I've had the same in previous life, but don't get disheartened when you do maybe lose out. And also, if you go to interview, you know, we keep a list of everyone that's interviewed well but didn't quite get the job, and we'll always promote those people or had really good application forms. And Vicky will keep a note of those that, as she mentioned earlier on, that have missed the grade but a screaming dedication and motivation. And to be honest with you, it takes a certain kind of person to work with kids, and it is far more about the person than it is about grades in maths and English and in A levels. So if you're looking at being a teaching assistant or an early years person, yeah, there is still some requirements for the industry, but the real main thing is can you work with kids? And as Vicky mentioned, it's either a screaming 3-year-old, or, as you all know from the classroom, every now and again, kids in school can be a bit naughty and the TA can get the brunt of it. So it's what you think, or you might like a quiet life in an office. But it's very different for us, even though we are office based. And Sophia is, for instance, our apprentice. She's getting involved with this thing tonight. Sophia will be coming with me as well to various events we do in year 11 when we're allowed to go to careers events in the schools, and to year 11 and 13 careers events. And Vicky previously did that with me as well when you were apprentice, didn't you? And I think it is always probably nicer to hear from the apprentice rather than from the one of the management, which I am on the team, to hear the real story, really. And but hopefully that's opened your eyes up to the opportunities. And I know the world is looking dire, but please know that schools and childcare providers and people like us that work with them are going to keep on surviving through all of this, and there's going to be no lack of vacancies coming up for the school this for September starts. So please do keep an eye out. And as I say, you can start as a teaching assistant and you can move right away through to being a qualified teacher if you wish. Or you can just dip in. I mean, maybe about 5% of our apprentices actually decide at the end of their apprenticeship it's not for them. You know, they've done a year and a half. They're thinking, well, it's not really for me now. And they can move on. You've got the qualifications and portable qualifications. And that's it from me, unless there's anything else to sum up from Sophia and Vicky.
No, I think I'm okay.
Brilliant. Well,
Yeah,
thank you very much for your time, folks. And good luck with your applications. And please do get in touch if we can advise in any way. There's only a certain amount of apprenticeships that we do, but we tend to know someone that does the other ones, if not us. So fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.